Hello everyone, my name is Alex, and on behalf of the organisers, Oliver Kinross, I'd like to welcome you to the latest Festival of BIM and Digital Construction webinar. I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank all of our sponsors, but with a special mention of Revisto, our sponsor for today's session. Today's webinar will begin with a panel discussion on BIM across the regions. How is BIM being delivered around the world? This will be followed by Revisto's panel on integrated collaboration, bigger than just BIM. Finally, we'll close the webinar with a presentation on the role of information management for as-built production. All of the speakers will be answering your questions throughout each session, so please do take the opportunity to submit your questions into the question box on your screen. Thank you everyone. I hope you enjoy the session, and now over to our first panelists.
Good afternoon, all. Welcome and thank you for joining our Women in BIM webinar at the Festival of BIM and Digital Construction. My name is Gergana Staykova. I am a member of the core team of Women in BIM, and today I will be moderating a panel discussion about how BIM is being delivered around the world. Joining me are four of our passionate Women in BIM regional leads, Claudia, Mercedes, Natalia, and Giulia. In a minute, I will invite each of them to introduce themselves so you can learn a bit more about who they are, where they are, and what they do. Before that, however, I would like to tell you just a few words about Women in BIM. We are a not-for-profit organization founded by our global chair, Rebecca Di Chico, in 2012 as a networking group with a mission to create a global online community of female BIM and digital construction professionals to raise awareness and address the global skills shortage crisis. As such, we broadly have three main objectives: to encourage and support women in BIM roles to have a strong voice in their workplace. Second, to act as a platform which enables and incentivizes the career progression of women into senior positions, as well as the retainment of women in the industry. And third, to attract young women into the industry, act as mentors to grow their skills and encourage them to enter BIM and digital roles in the future. And this is alongside, of course, promoting the experienced women from our network and creating opportunities for them to share their expertise with the wider BIM community. As an organization, we have expanded quite a lot over the past couple of years, and so we have put a great effort into driving each of our objectives through initiatives like our mentoring program, growing our presence in different regions of the world, and partnering with like-minded organizations and events, as well as creating various networking opportunities for our members. I must say here that none of this would have been possible without the full support of our sponsors, our annual gold sponsor, Glider BIM, and our annual silver sponsor, I3PT certification, and many thanks to each of them. Now, without further ado, I want to invite each of our panelists to introduce themselves. Mercedes, if I can start with you, please tell us and our guests a bit more about yourself.
Sure, absolutely. Hi all, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm Mercedes, a licensed architect from Uruguay. I'm very passionate about technology and processes in general. I run a company that's called Archsourcing, a BIM consultancy we co-founded 5 years ago. We mainly work for the West Coast of the United States, even if our headquarters is in Uruguay. And we streamline production mainly for architecture firms using BIM technologies.
Thanks. Giulia?
Hi, I'm Giulia. I am an architect. I'm based in United Kingdom, in the north of United Kingdom, but I'm Italian, so my career as a BIM architect started in Italy, and 3 years ago I moved in UK. At the moment I work for Laing Property Partners, and I'm a BIM architect.
Thank you. Claudia, could you tell us next a bit about yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Claudia Antunes. I am a BIM consultant based in Portugal. I run a business, a family business, and we are mainly focused at BIM training, BIM implementation, my background is in architecture, and I'm really excited to be here in this amazing woman panel discussion. And thanks for having me.
Of course, great. Thanks, Claudia. Natalia.
Hi, everyone. I'm Natalia Diaz. I'm architect and BIM consultant. I'm based in Santiago de Chile, but I've been working in Chile and in the UK as well. So I have experience working as a BIM coordinator, mainly in the UK, in different type of projects. So healthcare facilities, different mixed-use buildings, housing schemes, etc. So last year I moved back to Chile, so I co-founded a BIM consultancy called AmbientePRO. We are focused to implementing BIM in different type of, in mid-sized general contractor mainly, that are companies that never used BIM before, so it's a big challenge.
Sure, thank you. That was excellent. Thank you all for the introduction. I think we're now ready to move on to the discussion. I would like to set the scene first and begin by exploring the differences and similarities between each of the regions that you represent by asking you to briefly tell us how you find working in a BIM role in your part of the world. And particularly are females in the minority in your region? Claudia, could you start maybe?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. It's a challenge, obviously, because we are few women in our construction sector in Portugal. I saw some recent statistics, and women represent around 7% of all the sectors. So it's quite preoccupying to see that we need more female roles and action in this part of here in Portugal. So yeah, this number, it is rising, but it's really low, and mainly women, and particularly in BIM, we are not at an executive or leadership roles. Mainly women are at administrative activities, so it is really a shame, but it's very traditional. We do have a very traditional sector here in Portugal.
Sure, Mercedes.
Yeah, so I'm gonna have two regions here. So one would be Uruguay, which is where I'm based and I'm from. So BIM here is very incipient. We could say that we're not early adopters in that sense. So talking about women in BIM would be maybe a little bit too fast, because there's barely BIM here. On the United States side, so where it is widely more adopted, so I haven't seen exactly women in BIM efforts, but more of a wider equity design approach. So women in general, and just not only women, but equity in general on the design realm, which I think is it's great. And a last comment would be, so BIM and any adoption of a new technology is a challenge in general. So my point of view is, instead of trying to measure how many women there are, which are clearly fewer and in representation. I like to see it as an opportunity to take the lead on the technology side and on the BIM side, which it's not happening yet, but I'm pretty positive and see that there's an empty place that hasn't been taken, and I see many women, even if they're not enough, trying to get into that empty spot. So I'm excited to be a woman in BIM and trying to push that forward and make that happen.
Sure, that's a great positive spin on things.
Yeah.
Giulia, I mean, you're a representative of our own UK environment, but perhaps you know how things are in Italy as well. What's your perspective on this?
I started to study BIM in 2013 in Italy, and at the time in Italy, no one was aware about what BIM was. I remember that I got in contact with an architect in Switzerland, and he presented to me for the first time this new brand methodology of work, and I got instantly very passionate about BIM. And when I came back in Italy and talked with my colleague about what BIM was, they were discouraging me, and because I was talking with them about something that they never heard about. So it was very strange. But when I was presenting BIM, I tried to present them BIM as a revolution. I was talking with them, and I was used to say, look at BIM as it was for photography. When digital camera arrived in the market at an accessible price, I remember all my friends were saying, I never give up with my old camera. I don't want a digital one. But now, if you look around, no one is using an old camera. All of them have a digital camera. And that's what happened in Italy and what happened in UK. 3 years ago, I was looking for a more stimulating environment. For this reason, I decided to move in UK. And I found BIM. BIM is here and is now everyone is talking about BIM.
Sure, that is great. Glad that you found the right place for you.
I will
not the right weather, but the right technology for sure.
Yeah,
Giulia,
sure.
I'm stealing the comparative from the photograph.
Yeah, that's a great one.
Good one.
Natalia, what do you think about this?
Yes, I think that, well, I will make a little bit of context about the Latin American region. So as Mercedes says before, so BIM is not further developed in the region, but so Chile, that is the country that I represent, is the first Latin American country to develop a BIM strategy. That was in 2015, actually. So it has been a couple of years working in the area. And so last year, when I moved back, I was very surprised to see a lot of women working in key positions here. So actually the lead, the head of the governmental program is a woman, and she is talking about everything, presenting in conference. So there are a few of them working in all the public sector, so trying to push all the standards and developing this implementation from the side of the public sector, and as well another group working in the private side. So it's very good to see them, and there are a few of them, but the bad thing is that we don't have a figure. We don't know what is the universe, you know, and they are not connected. So that is my role here. So to present them women in BIM, that is this community, this collaborative community, to get them together. But the good point here is we're in a place where women are very visible in the BIM side. So I'm happy to be here to connect as well my experience in the UK that have been fantastic, especially knowing the women in BIM community. That was a fantastic approach to know the community.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, definitely. I'm glad we have a positive perspective on things as well. This was a great way to try and begin to understand what are the differences and similarities in all of our regions. Of course, this was focused a bit more on the role of women in driving BIM within these regions. But I would like now to step back and perhaps even generalize a bit more, not generalize, but get a wider impression of how BIM is being adopted or implemented in your region. Like, what are the main applications of BIM that are being sort of focused on? What project stages, perhaps a bit, if I could hear a bit more on this from you. Is there anyone who wants to start first? Giulia?
Living in the north of England, I can see that the government is pushing a lot the introducing of BIM. So in a place where there are big construction project, public project, BIM is fundamental. So now, as I was saying before, BIM here is everywhere. Every time that I talk with someone, they are aware about BIM. One of my biggest fear for real is that when I talk with someone for the first time, I never know if he really understands the real power of BIM methodology, or if he is part of this big group of people who think that BIM is just Revit. So he thinks that my job is just to create a nice picture, and that is, in my opinion, creating even lots of conflict between people, between colleagues. Because if we present BIM as an advanced piece of technology that is difficult to approach, it's easy that the person who can drive and push forward the adoption of BIM will be the person who going to stop it. For this reason, I think that we are all human. We always talk about diversity and inclusion, and need to start to talk about diversity and inclusion in our work environment and with our client as well, because I put myself as a person who have high interest and skills in IT and software, and how I can help the people who have not my approach with technology to be more near to BIM. And as a first step, what I'm used to do when I talk with people and they ask me, what is BIM? What does it mean? So I usually try to use the 3 words better information management, because I want to pass across the information that my job is not to create a 3D, but is to manage information with a single source of truth, that my job is coordinated a common environmental data source that is totally different from a pretty picture. And I feel that we have the duty to pass across this message to our client.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great point, actually, about making sure that we use the language and really try to bring everyone on the journey with us. Natalia, what is your experience and what are your thoughts on how BIM is being adopted in Chile?
Okay. So in Chile, even with the presence of BIM, or probably that concept or those software have been present for long years in the industry, not mainly, but have been present for a few years. just in 2015, as I told you before, it was the governmental program that was created to improve the productivity of the construction industry. So because the productivity in our sector is quite a big issue. So just to make some figures, the productivity in 2016, the Chilean productivity was just 58% of an average productivity of the OECD countries in the same area, you know, so we have a lot to do. And with this context, those years since 2015 have been a huge work in terms to put the real concept of BIM as part of the work. I mean, the methodology, the thing about all the information, that database that Giulia was talking about. So not just software, not just production of drawings, not just clash detection. It's information that should be the base of when we are talking about BIM. That give us all the process in the early stages of a project, or even coordination on the interactive process, etc., etc. So these have been the journey that Chile has been in with this governmental program, and that's important because I think that that program have been very key to put the real concept of BIM into the industry. So making seminars, doing conferences, etc., that is including more of the private sector to know about BIM and understand as well the full idea of this behind. So we are starting now because last year the national standard was launched, but we haven't used in a real project, and we expected to have this year. So it's going to be a few public projects that are going to include this BIM standard as part of their requirements, and it is already confirmed that this is going to be a social housing scheme located in Santiago. But so we are in this starting point, probably when the UK was in 2016, when they start to be mandatory, the BIM requirements started to be mandatory. So now we have to see how it's going to work, how it's going to see all the stakeholders working in BIM, understanding that the collaboration is basic to incorporate this methodology. So let's see.
Sure. Claudia.
We are running late here in Portugal. When I hear you guys talking about strategies, about government implementation and taking the lead for this adoption, we don't have this here in Portugal. So this is why I'm saying we are running late here. What we see here is more like a bottom-up kind of situation. We have companies and professionals that really need to be up to date and to be in this global digitalization market, and need to cooperate really with other parts of the world, and they feel this need to adopt BIM and to be more efficient, and to it's kind of a lonely BIM what we are doing in the companies, and we don't want that, because BIM, we all know it's about collaboration, and it reminds me when we found our company back to 2015, and we started talking about BIM and all the advantages of using this methodology, and people were like, what are you trying to say? Kind of an alien mode. It was really difficult at first, but now I think it's different. Professionals and companies are really aware, and they feel that they need to join this BIM implementation. So it's how we are here in Portugal.
You're seeing some improvement already in the level of understanding.
Yeah. but few. There are some occasional efforts, but it's not a global strategy. And I think that's a problem. We also find that there is a lot of resistance. I think because of the traditional way of doing things, not only the architectural way of doing things, but all the sector really.
Okay, perhaps that will be the next thing, more of a centralized approach to implementing BIM.
Hope so.
Mercedes.
Claudia. Yeah, so what Claudia was talking about, she reminded me of, we were, I would say 5 or 4 years ago, we got together with a graphic designer to make our website prettier. So we were trying to explain what BIM was, not to an architect, but to a graphic designer. And we showed him a couple of projects and how things got together. I think it was a house with the HVAC and everything that was model. And he was like, and how was it done before? And it was so logical to him that was the only way to do it. He couldn't imagine another way. He couldn't picture another way to do it. It was I don't know, I remember that moment and I tell that anecdote very often because it was pretty obvious to him. And sometimes you're trying to explain that to somebody that's on the AEC industry or in construction, architect, engineer, and it's not that obvious. So per Gergana's question, so I think, so I have you know, glasses for Uruguay and for the US. And I see how things are being adopted from the industry side on the United States, because the industry was the one that pushed forward for BIM to be adopted rather than the government or rather than institution. And the other side that, I mean, Uruguay is not there yet. Claudia, don't feel behind because we're behind as well. But I think the effort. Yeah, no, but I just don't think there's a behind and an effort because so it's, you get a pusher, sometimes the industry, sometimes the government or institutions. So here they're trying to push from the institution side. Of course, industry is always pushing as well, but maybe less. And but my fear is that sometimes the push is per sector, and it's not a unified push. So sometimes when I do work for the West Coast and I see they're clearly more advanced than we are here, I still see that there's kind of a BIM development, a particular BIM develop on each phase. So you get a BIM on the design, BIM on the construction documents or more technical phase, then you get a BIM for the contractor, then, and it's kind of a closed circle of BIM on each stage, but there's not a common skeleton of data that flows. So when it comes to architecture firms or even design, I mean, there's no even way that we can think about fabrication, because that would be on the contractor side or on the manufacturer side. So even if you can say, I mean, we are behind, we're not behind, we're just like early adopters or whatever, there's always, to me, there's always a more important thing that's not exactly the stage of development in which you are in terms of BIM, but how connected all the parts are. Because I've heard here that maybe there's a BIM model that's developed on an architecture firm, and then the contractor doesn't get it, and they start from scratch, and that happens in the US as well, even if you're not on the same adoption point or development. So it's I don't know, maybe it's a different way of measuring how we are or how it is adopted, not only in every cell, but on a wider perspective as well.
Do you see it changing, as in getting some continuity between the information, or do you feel that this is just the way the industry has chosen to work?
I don't. That's a good one. I don't know if they've chosen. I'm part of the industry as well. I don't know if it's a choice. I think any technology adoption is a challenge, and with a challenge, there's a little bit of fear. Because I mean, there's economical pressure, there's team pressure, there are companies that are very skeptical to adopt it, not only from an economical perspective, but from a human resources perspective as well. So maybe the connection between all the disciplines stays at another plane of importance. So it's not necessarily we choose to stay unconnected, well, we just prioritize other things rather than the global, which is natural. I'm not saying it's wrong, but I think every phase is prioritizing what they need to do, and sometimes it's hard to get the bigger overview. Well, any governmental norms or guidance or path eases that way, certainly, and gives you guidance for that. But it's another challenge I'm adding to the BIM implementation.
Yeah, we have already many. That's great. I was going to ask a bit more specifically about what's the kind of who drives the adoption, but I think you all answered that in a way, and it seems to be quite different, I would say, from what I gather. And it's perhaps this way in the UK as well. In certain sectors, it's government, and in certain others, it's private clients, or the companies like contractors or architects as well. But I mean, would you say, or what do you see as the main benefits that the different members of a project are getting from the implementation of BIM? Is everyone managing to benefit in a way? Anyone?
Of course.
Sure. Mercedes, do you want to? Or anyone? Yeah. Julia, go ahead. Yeah.
Go.
There are several benefits that we can all appreciate. The first one that comes to my mind is the fact that we are a lot more precise. We are, in my opinion, even faster. Sometimes when people talk about the price of introducing BIM, I always think, yeah, probably you have to spend a bit of money in advance, but after you are faster, you are more precise, you can do lots of things more if you use BIM properly. And it was same before. The problem is when people doesn't use properly, or how Mercedes was saying, if in all the history of a project, there is this connection between the various teams. And so probably we are in certain the problem because if we doesn't start to use it properly, and we as a person who talk BIM, we doesn't pass across entirely the meaning of using BIM. We stop it while the benefits are so big, and I left the other girls to explore more deeply, but precision and we are so.
I have also seen that we have some questions from the audience. Maybe we can answer this through some of them. The first one is to each of you, I think. How was your first project experience, I guess, in a BIM environment?
I cried. Literally. No, but it had to do with something that I think Giulia was saying. I am really enthusiastic about BIM because I think it's a great methodology, but not only about that, but because I think before anything that our industry, or at least the architectural process, was sick somehow. So there's no way things could be done that way, or that the process made architects that had 8 years of studies on their backs do things that way. So just like drawing lines or just trying to coordinate in 2 dimensions, because it makes no sense. So usually on a project, before doing it in BIM, I was trying to work as a machine, like the more I could produce, the better. The more lines I could draw, the better. The more PDFs I can export, the better. But then on my first project experience, as a team and as an individual as well. So it was very frustrating, because I had to learn to use the tools, but the kind of problems I faced were completely different. Were more of problem solving rather than I need to draw thousands of lines and stay up until late, which I'm really bad at. So it was a little bit frustrating, and of course you need to learn the tools, and it's a ramp up. And of course there's a learning curve, but the most important thing to me is like architecture jobs, or at least my architecture jobs, used to lack a lot of problem solving, resource or just thinking, and you do have that right now. So it's kind of a mind shift as well.
Okay.
That's it.
Let me share with you my first eye-opening experience, if I can put it this way. When I was a student, my first job really was at a company in Madrid. I was studying in Madrid, at Spain, and they were doing a large train station. There I saw a big project, and I thought, yeah, this is the only way to do this. I cannot imagine doing this the traditional way. It would be impossible. So there was really my first eye-opening experiences. Yeah, we do need to have more efficient tools, and not only tools but process, like Mercedes was saying, and like Giulia was saying too. It's not only Revit, it's not only the tools, but the methods, and this was my experience, yeah, it was it changed me as a student.
Sure. I've seen one question that perhaps Natalia can begin answering. That's with so many non-technical, either zero tech or very low tech, for example, smartphones, subcontractors, the small enterprises who actually build the buildings don't use BIM at all in the US, and I'm guessing in Latin America and Europe too. Do you see this being addressed at all in your country?
Okay, I think that this is a very interesting question, because sometimes we think that BIM is just technology. It's just for the geekies, it's just it's something very specific. So if you are, I don't know, if you have a few years more, or if you are not prepared enough, you are not ready to go and work with BIM. That is not true, because if you are able to send an email, you can use BIM tools. So BIM tool is not just build a 3D model with information and to try to connect everything, all the requirements of the project, because this is key. I think that is the change of the vision, is to understand that the project is information. So everyone have some information to share and to improve the performance of the project. So yes, today we have a lot of things that are usable in smartphones, by internet, that are BIM tools as well, and that give us a better communication between all the people that is involved in a project. So that is the other additional key factor of BIM, is collaboration. It's working in a team to make the better possible project. So it's not just someone that is working in 2 screens and using very specific software. Is everyone. Is the person that define the requirements of the project, and the person that is going to build it, and the person that is going to make the maintenance. Is everything. And as Mercedes was saying, hopefully all those, like the process of the project, should be connected, so to make it better, not just partially in the design or partially in the construction. We all have to understand what the other needs to make the project better. So I think it's absolutely possible. I know that at the beginning it looked like far away, all this technology environment, but I think it's absolutely possible.
Sure. I think. Yeah, did you want to add something?
Yeah, sure. I do agree with Natalia. Yeah, all the parties should be involved, and they need to know their value in this chain, this information chain. Sometimes because we do work with lots of manufacturers with developing the BIM objects, and sometimes they tell me, but this is only a square, with my product is only something that they think there is really small, but no, it's very important to be part of this to this, because the information is the key, not because it's a small product in the whole project. It's that is very important. All parties are important.
I think I'm going to give one question to answer quickly, and perhaps we have to close after that. That's a question about clients, I guess, regardless of whether they're private or public clients. And it is the client willing to pay more for BIM projects? Who wants to start?
At the long run, yes. I don't know. So at the beginning, when we started, like I would say, yeah, 5 years ago, if we had a project, then some clients wanted CAD. And so at first, we delivered proposals for CAD services and for Revit. And CAD was cheaper. I don't know why. We were wrong because it took us much more time. So after a first project, and knowing that you can export CAD from Revit and stuff, or other software, then we didn't have to reveal the tool we were using to get the project done. So it's the same price. So BIM and CAD are both the same price. Then we're going to leverage what do you need exactly to make that price fit your budget. But so I know people say like BIM is more expensive than CAD. It's not. It's the same. It's just a different way of organizing time and making the project, process flow. And that's it. So I usually don't go there because it's not more expensive, it's less expensive, and then I make the price go up. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, I certainly don't. So the only thing that's difficult is that as it's relatively new, there are fairly less people that know their way around some tools, so it's maybe harder to get people on board that know that specific tool. But I really don't like to see like this is a new tool that's more expensive. It's not. It's better, and it's the same price.
Sure.
For the same results. I mean,
does anyone else want to add anything? I can jump on to another question.
Yeah, I agree. The output is what is important. The client really only need to see the result. The way we get there, and if we take 1 hour or 10 using CAD or using BIM tools, if we can say that. What is important is the output. So the price should not be higher. It should be the same. Yeah.
Sure. I think I agree. By the way, if anything, it's more efficient. So, and the investment in being more efficient, I don't think should be pushed on to clients.
And the return is pretty fast. I mean, I say that like just lightly, but for clients, for owners, for architecture firms, for manufacturers, the return is fast.
Yeah, sure. There is an interesting question. Again, it's to do with clients and their understanding, I think, and preparedness for BIM. Do you receive employers' information requirements around the world? Do clients ask for information that could be used at the operational stage? Is information exchange such as COBie being implemented? 3 questions in one, but if we can try to answer as much as possible. Giulia, do you want to start?
In my experience so far, I didn't receive the ER or request for COBie, because usually, as I was saying at the start, the client know BIM, but not deeply enough to know what he have to ask to us. It's more my rule, the rule of our firm, that is going there and say we work in BIM and we can give to you that if you are able to give us this information. So we are more in charge to drive the client where we need to achieve a full process in BIM than the opposite, at least at the moment.
Sure. Natalia, what's your experience?
Well, I work in very few projects that ask for COBie, but I think that here's again the role that a client is playing as well in BIM. It's like it's okay to ask for some information, but you have to get involved. You know, you have to know what is the purpose to use that information after in the maintenance process. So if the information is going to be useful, yes, let's work and make the effort to put all this information in our project. But if it's just ask because I want everything, but without getting involved, that is not the way. I think that is why the concept of working in a team is something that is very precious in BIM. So I think that is the thing. If you ask for something, you have to provide some information up and to work with the team to develop what you really need and how you're going to use that information. I think that is key, like the understanding of how to connect the different parts of the project.
And that's key to making a project, you know, like the price of a project meet the needs. Because I mean, it happened to me, and what Natalia said is exactly like this. So you get asked for something, and maybe that's too expensive for the client. And it's not because BIM is expensive, it's because maybe the output and what you need for that, it's not properly leveraged. So probably you don't need COBie, or maybe you need COBie, and if that's what you need, it's what you're gonna get. But also sometimes you need an output that can be achieved by another way, faster or sometimes less expensive or more accurate according to the output you need.
Okay, thanks to everyone. I think we have quite a few more questions, but perhaps we'll receive these after the event and try to answer them and publish the answers on the webinar website. It has been such a great and informative conversation, and I would have loved to hear more about BIM implementation around the globe. Thanks to our 4 panelists for sharing your thoughts and experiences with us today, and I certainly learned a lot. I want to thank again everyone who joined us today for your time, and I hope you all took something away from the discussion. If you have any more questions, please, or any other feedback really, just reach out to us on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @womeninbim, or send us an email at info@womeninbim.org. We love hearing from you. And finally, I would also like to extend my thanks to the organizers of this event, the Festival of BIM and Digital Construction. Thanks for having us, and enjoy the rest of this webinar.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ghana, and to all of our panelists for your presentation. It was really interesting hearing about the implementation of BIM across the world. We now have our next panel discussion, which is from Revisto. So I'm going to hand over to them now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, we're gonna let our panelists start to jump in here with their videos, and unmute yourself, guys. Awesome. David Ramirez had something come up, so he's not going to be joining us today. So I'll give a brief introduction and then let these other guys jump in, introduce themselves, and we can get going on the questions after that. But I did first want to say thank you to the previous session and those amazing leaders in the industry across the globe. So thank you to all of you for speaking about how you guys are using BIM across all your organizations as well as across the globe. I definitely took some things away from there. Some things from Mercedes brought up that connected tissue, that connected skeleton. And that's something we're going to talk about today with our integrated collaboration platform, having one place for all of these different organizations, these different disciplines, design, construction, fabrication, owners, giving them a place to bring all this information together. That's what the true ICP really is about. To take a little bit of a step back, my name's Sean Hester. I work at Revisto. I'm our implementation specialist for our strategic GC customers across North America. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce, or let a couple of these guys introduce themselves. I'll call out names and you guys can jump in there. So Hamad, if you could start, you're first on the list here. If you could give a brief introduction and let us know your background and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Sean. So my name is Hamad Chaudhry. I'm the Director of Virtual Design and Construction for Ltda. Ltda is a Canadian company, and essentially we design, finance, construct, equip, operate, and manage anything that can be built. So huge gamut of projects from small renovations to massive multi-billion-dollar projects. And my role is really helping to implement the VDC technology, tools, and processes on our projects across Western Canada, and just trying to innovate in that sense of, hey, what tools and processes kind of help our current construction problems.
Awesome, thank you, Hamad. Pedro, if you could give a little introduction about yourself, please.
Yeah, hey, my name is Pedro Fajardo. So I've been with Shop Architects now for 2 years. So Shop Architects, we worked on all kinds of buildings, mixed use, OBO projects, which is U.S. government projects, which we also work for like big tech companies, high tower residential buildings, all kinds of projects, right? So my role there is I am a designer and also I am a BIM manager. So I've been doing that for those 2 years, and with the focus more on like digital design, right, and digital deliveries, and how we approach the project delivery for each individual project, because all projects are different depending on what the client wants and the process that we see fit for everyone. So yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Pedro. And as I said, David wasn't able to join us. We're going to jump to Amir. If you could give us a little bit of your background.
Sure. My name is Admir Baraj, and I work for Cortland. I'm the director of BIM for Cortland. It's a multifamily real estate developer. So as the owner, we do have a couple of in-house things, such as we are the GC, we are the designer, interior design, as well as architecture. And we also have facilities and operations as well. So we sort of are, trying to chase after that BIM life cycle all the way through. So.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you very much. We have a really good cross section here of different disciplines, different experiences. So I'm really excited to see some of the or hear some of the answers that you guys have to some of the questions here regarding really collaborating on your projects utilizing platforms that help you guys do that, but also talking about the process and the people and how we're able to make that work. It's not just about the tools, right? It's about the people and the process and how you guys roll this out and make it a success really on all your projects. So the first question I did want to ask you guys is, what do you think can either encourage or discourage project collaboration? And I'll let Hamad kick things off there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's sort of a loaded question in one sense, because I'm going to say this a lot today. One size does not fit all, and I think Pedro and Admir and Sean, you guys will agree with that. So first thing is on the discourage side of collaboration, I would say is experience. So I have bad experience working with X, whatever it is. You can throw in BIM, you can throw in a tool, you can throw in a type of project. That's probably one of the most common ones. The other one is stress, deliverables, and contracts. Ultimately, you could call that liability issues. What I mean by that is certain contract types you'll see parties aren't necessarily encouraged to collaborate, right? So it's sort of like, I got to watch out my back. I don't trust this party, even if we're all working on the same project. And then the last thing that I think really discourages project collaboration can also be a lack of technical knowledge on how to implement some of these processes that actually give us the efficiencies that we want from collaboration, right? So I've never used, I've never worked on a design build project, or I've never used Revitso or whatever, or I've never used a BIM FM kind of, and that kind of a mindset. Or a lot of things that we see is from some of our design partners or subcontractors is, hey, look, we've never had to do this in the past. We have a lot of experience doing our work the way that we do it. Why do we need to shift that way? So a lot of it is, if your team is not working on the same platforms and tools you are, you're not going to get that same collaboration, because not everyone's on the same field. Ways of encouraging it now, I think, on the other side is the human factor. Right. So what I mean by that is, as for myself, my team, and everyone on the VDC side, at least, we need to go above and beyond and help those that may not be as comfortable with the processes or tools, and ultimately, therefore, they may step back from some of this collaboration. Right. Another thing would be explaining and understanding the risks or the implications of the contract that I was talking about, that each party may be talking about or scared of, or may not even want to discuss. So through our experience, for example, with a lot of architects, and Pedro, maybe you can shed light on this, is, hey, where's our value from collaborating with you guys above and beyond our normal means? Like, hey, we have our 2D design document deliverables, we have contract administration, just go through the normal processes. We don't want to use the BIM VDC process to, we've got enough going on, for example. Once you sit down and explain, like, hey, look, we're not trying to do that. We're actually trying to work as a team, see where everyone's risk is at, use this platform and collaboration to help identify those and ultimately make it better. So, if Pedro's the architect and he has an issue with X, Y, and Z, by talking like this, I'm aware and I can be like, oh, okay, well, we can't go this way because that might not be most efficient for this project team member. And then the last thing is, if there is no process in place, make sure that the team is developing it together. And if it is a process that's already in place, make sure that you take the time to explain to the team why it is how it is, right? A lot of people won't ask these questions to us one-to-one directly. We'll just give you resistance. And that's sort of what I think can help increase collaboration is addressing in that format.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Hamad. Pedro, do you want to weigh in there a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, he touched on a lot of points. I think for the architect side, I think it is, the discouraging part is that, from the beginning, every stakeholder should kind of be like on the same page and willing to work together, right? Which is this collaborating process. And a lot of the times we're not there, right? Like sometimes the client just wants documentation deliverable, and therefore that kind of sets a wall for all the consultants, all the everyone involved in the project to kind of just go on their own boat and just do whatever they want to do, right? However they want to do it, instead of having an integrated process and an environment where everyone is collaborating together. So I think that is one of the downsides to this, and also the contract and liability issues. It's like sometimes we have the tools to deliver a project, right, fully in BIM, right, but they don't, clients and the contract doesn't allow for this, right, because of the fear that we are used to delivering projects this other way, and it has worked for years, right? So there's this it's not black and white. There's all kinds of shades, right, of gray as to how you deliver projects. And I think, but the encouraging part in all of this is that, as an industry, we are kind of understanding BIM more in the sense that it's not just modeling and having this, perfect coordinated model, but everything that lies behind it, right? The value of the data behind all of this, right? And that's what, as architects and as an industry, we should push forward, is this is the value that you'll get, because it's not just the model that will get built. It's also after the project gets built, you have all this information that you can use. So I think all of these things are important, and yeah, there's a lot of blockages in the process, but there's also a lot of opportunities, right? So that's...
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. And Mary, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, as far as discouragement goes, I'm gonna kind of go into a little bit of the technology part. Looking at it from an owner's perspective, I'm thinking about the fact that we need to be on the same page from day one. We have to have options on how we use our technologies, and we need to figure out how we can kind of come up with a system in place, a process that we can continue throughout the project. And if you throw too much technology at the same time, right at the project, there's a lot of people that really don't want to get into it. They don't want to deal with it. They get scared. They get intimidated by it, and you get a bunch of people that basically throw their hands up and say, I don't know what to do with this. So that's the discouraging part. But the encouragement is really, to me, it all goes back to talking about how do we make this happen. We need to be ready and to go at the beginning of a project and say we need to have a plan in place how to train these people on these types of technologies when we do collaboration type work. And that training needs to have a specific workflow in place that can work at any point in time, even if there's multiple people that leave the job and they go on to different jobs. You got new people coming in. You need to be able to kind of retrain those people in a quick way to get them going and continue the process. So
Yeah, thank you. You guys definitely hit on a lot of items there. And to be honest, I'd like to ask a follow-up question to those is, you know, what's the most common setbacks you guys have seen that have cost you guys time and money as it relates to project collaboration? And that one can be pretty broad as well. But if you guys could give us just a couple of those common ones that you've seen repeat itself on certain projects. And I'll let Pedro start
there. Okay, so one of the things is for us is as an architect is the biggest challenge and setback is is obviously to coordinate and design the model and get the design intent correctly, right, delivered on time. So the challenging part of that is allocating the correct amount of time to document that process, right? And sometimes BIM is like, it has the technology, right, of BIM has allowed us to in a way shorten that time, right, that time frame that we design and coordinate these models. But we found that in most of the projects that we do, right, we spend so much time modeling all the elements, making sure everything is okay, that the data is input correctly, but then we end up flattening that information into a 2D documentation set, right? And then when coordinating that, we also start masking things that the 3D model is not showing, or that it's not coordinated correctly. So we just flatten all that information, right, and just print it in 2D. And so this process is very inefficient because we're spending all this time building this 3D model, all this information just to create a document set. So we would rather, as designers, ideally spend more time, designing and coordinating and being able to deliver this data and information to the client, rather than, after all, just giving them a documentation set. So I think, as an office here at Shop Architects, we are trying to push for this, digital delivery, as not as a standard, but as a way of adding value to BIM, right, and to how we deliver projects.
Very nice, thank you. Amir, anything to add there?
I mean, it's over communicating sometimes is a thing that does happen. We tend to feel like we do the best job by having these meetings and doing things, but sometimes too much information can be a struggle. And with collaboration and whatnot, if we can keep everybody in the same room long enough, we can have enough decisions made before everybody walks away that can actually impact the project in the right way. So that has happened before. Those are kind of the common ones for us.
Great, thank you. And Hamad, I know you receive a lot of the information from the designers. So anything to add from Pedro's comments there? And then also, obviously, what are the common things that you see on your projects from a collaboration standpoint that cost you guys time and money?
Definitely, yeah. So sort of building to Pedro's point there, we definitely understand that, right? So from our standpoint, we have lump sum or hard bid kind of projects where we're separate from the design team, and then we have projects where we're doing design build. So essentially, we're one entity, if you will. And the pains that Pedro's talking about is like something that we as an industry are working towards, I think, but there is no solution to fix all those problems right off the bat right now. And part of that, again, I keep going back to it, I think comes back to our sort of typical procurement methods, if you will, right? The contract types, the way everything's set up, and protecting the risk and liability. A common sort of issue with not the production side, but just overall is, we have multiple systems and methods of communicating. This sort of builds onto what Mira was saying, is like, yeah, you can have too much communication, and sometimes we have the right amount of communication just with too many different platforms, right? So what happens is certain people may be super, you know, sophisticated at their scope of work, and we need them. However, the mess of systems to get the information they need may not be as fluid, right? And then, like Pedro was saying, sometimes our 2D, 3D, and even schedule or information data is not actually in an easy to access format or system or whatever you want to call it. So now you've got several different parties with several different ways of communicating at platforms, with several different pieces of information from several different types of drawings or schedules, whatever you want to say. So that is probably tying into the biggest issue. So it takes Pedro's point, Admir's point, and what we're kind of seeing, in my opinion. And then sort of the last track, I think that's why we're seeing a lot of accountability on our side, like right now with our own internal processes, and creating some of that is so that, you know, regardless of where you're going, at least our clients and sort of, you know, people that we work with can trust that we have a process, even if maybe the client doesn't or other teams do, that we can bring everyone on board, right? So I think that is another thing we're starting to see, is that there's multiple different solutions and ways to go about looking at these setbacks, but they're not going to go away. And as we progress, like we did with BIM, for example, coming a little bit more standardized, these issues and challenges are going to progress that much as well. So yeah, I mean, hopefully that answers your question. But
no, that's great. And I mean, you guys hit on a couple things. Hamad, you talked about accountability, and we're going to get into that in just a second. I want to ask you guys specifically about that and hear from the rest of the group. But you guys have talked a lot about the human factor, right? The people as part of this overall process. So can you guys speak a little bit to, you know, some challenges and successes to getting all the groups of people, you know, in all the different disciplines, the owner, the contractor, designer, fabrication, you know, it's a lot of people. You have field teams, you have office staff. I mean, there's a lot of people on these projects, right? Can you guys speak to how you've successfully been able to get everyone together and into that, you know, cohesive environment, utilizing the tools, and just getting their buy-in? I think that's the one thing I want to hear is how do you get people's buy-in? Because I know when I was working in construction, that was always a challenge, right? How do we get everyone speaking the same language with all these different platforms and these different siloed pieces of communication? So, Amir, I'll let you start.
Sure. I mean, it goes back to building relationships, and, you know, building it from, you know, from my perspective, it's, you know, we have different departments that basically do all those things that you just mentioned. So to us, it was more about, you know, building it one department at a time, and then kind of connecting those by finding the right things that they need, or how we can connect to each other from one department to the next, to kind of say, hey, this is what we can do for you, this is what you can do for us, let's figure it out, let's connect, so we can actually start collaborating the information that's necessary for all of us to continue on moving along and, you know, getting the job done. So essentially, it's, you know, just from my perspective, it's, you know, looking at that. But then also another part is, if we do have external partners that we're dealing with, you know, we look at it as like within the market that we're in, right? We look at the industry, we look at the market, then we zone into the actual area where we have to do this type of work, and we look for the people that complement what we are after. We're looking at people that sort of have the same ideologies as we do, and then we start the communication about, hey, this is what we've done so far. Is this the type of collaboration you've dealt with? Do you agree? Do you don't agree? Have you done anything better than what we have done so far? And, you know, let's talk about it if it is. And we kind of build those relationships that way, where we have a few people here and there in different sectors and markets. And that way we can kind of just build upon that and continue to grow. So.
Great, yeah. Hamad, anything you want to add there?
yeah, I think on our side, it's been a multi-year process, right? So using something like Revitso, for example, as our integrated collaboration platform, really started a few years back. And, you know, I think our kind of process to this has been, you need to be transparent with our outcomes and not promise anything above and beyond. But at the same time, while we're doing that, we need somebody that can champion the process, right? So from our team, somebody boots on the ground that's going to help the team, at least from our side as Ltda, to implement it. So it has been a multi-year process. It has been a struggle in some regards, but at the same time, one of the things that we've been able to do, even on projects where there's no mandate for using any kind of BIM or VDC deliverables, is still bring in some of these platforms like Revitso, bring the teams together. And one of the more interesting things is when you have a contract where nobody's obligated to provide anything within this environment or to work in an integrated fashion, yet we bring a platform up and we de-risk and show everybody all of that. All of a sudden, when people are using it without any contractual obligation for their own kind of day-to-day kind of stuff, then that really helps us going forward. So we can use these, hey, this was not a requirement, the team embraced it, here's some examples of the outcomes, and use that for future experiences. So that's been one part of how we bring stakeholders together. The second one is looking at the requirements. So if clients are asking for it, depending on the project scope, that makes it a lot easier to implement. So again, it's not like we've got it across the board on 100% of our projects, just because, like I was saying earlier, right, we're working on small, like washroom renovations to $1 billion hospitals, so it's sort of hard to get an integrated platform for those kind of smaller projects. But now that we've got the experience, we've got the clients, we've rolled it out on projects that don't need it, it's become that much more, you know, a use case kind of thing.
Yeah, great. Anything from you, Pedro, on this topic?
Yeah, really short. I mean, one of the ways that we were able to bring all stakeholders together was, so we developed this white paper within the office about, like, you know, digital deliveries and everything surrounding that, right? And other industries that are practicing it, right, that have been able to do that, like the, you know, automobile industry and everyone who's doing it, right, like ships and all the industries that use the tools that allow for this, you know, integrated collaboration. So then the way we approached it is we presented it to the client really early on the project, right? You know, with all the complexities and all the good things about it, right? And eventually, you know, they felt comfortable to allow us to use a tool like Revitso, right, to be able to integrate them into the project. So that gave them that sense of, like, okay, like, we will be able to manage this and be able to collaborate and be integrated in the process. So I think that's very important, is, you know, very early on the project to involve everyone, right? Be able to you know, see the good sides and the bad sides of the process. So that way everyone is on board. And I think we had a very successful, like, so I think when we did it was at you know, at the beginning of schematic design, and we just tested it out for the 50%, right, the halfway of the schematic design, and, you know, it was very interesting to see everyone just catch up really quickly and be able to integrate.
Great, thank you guys. A lot of good stuff there. Having a champion, you know, obviously that goes a long way. Having that, you know, person who's passionate about this, these processes and helping lead that process, but also just getting that feedback. I heard that from a couple of you guys, getting that feedback. How's the process going? Do we need to change anything? Do we need to adapt? And I think, you know, that helps get the buy-in, right? People want to give feedback. If they're willing to give the feedback, it's always good to hear it and adapt and change things. A question that did come in while we were chatting about this, and I think it's relevant right now, especially with the, you know, the state of the world with the pandemic going on, is, you know, speaking of collaboration, how have you found right now during what's happening, the collaboration at home while people are working at home? Can you guys speak to, maybe how you're continuing to get stakeholders involved while everyone is not coming together face to face. And that's probably a good opportunity to talk about some tools that you guys use to help with that. It's still very much a people aspect, but we need tools to help with that collaboration as people are no longer face to face as much as they were. So I'll let Hamad kick that one off, please.
Yeah, for sure. In terms of, I guess, the COVID aspect of it right now and working digitally, a lot of our projects during the whole pandemic were able to continue forward on construction sites, of course, within Canada, within precautions that we had to implement. We did have some projects that shut down. So for the ones that continued constructions, our site team, the core team, remained on site, and some of them worked remotely. But as you mentioned, a lot of our architects, designers, and so on and so forth were working from home. A lot of our teams have actually gave me feedback that their meetings have actually increased, and they've been spending more time, talking to people on their projects and stuff like that, even though physically we're apart now. And part of it for us, I think, is we're VDC kind of focused overall. That's my realm, and Sean and Pedro and Admir sort of are all within that same realm, but we all also have outside facing businesses that we're a part of that are, not necessarily 100% on the VDC side. So, your typical people like accountants and coordinators and superintendents. And so for us, having something like the G Suite, for example, which we were leveraging a lot before, but having that so multiple people can jump in and collaborate on documents was huge. Revitso, which we already had, was a huge thing, but now we're able to get it a little bit further, I think. And Sean, you know better than I do, but our numbers over the pandemic looking at Revitso license usage is sort of just shot up as our video calling and everything else did. So those were some of the tools and technologies that we've had that have really helped out. And then again, I'm going to have to say that, our own internal tool set too that we've developed. So like Gate 3 is what it's called, our project management system, that really became a little bit of a backbone too as well for the company. So that's sort of how, the tools that we use to collaborate, especially during COVID, have come apart. And I think now, I want to hear what Pedro and Admir say as well for their experiences.
Yeah, you want to go ahead, Pedro?
Yeah, sure. I mean, on my end here, definitely collaboration has increased, right? In the sense that there's a lot of communication between teams. And I think tools like Revitso has really helped us in the office to kind of just keep all the issues going, right? And just coordinating all the projects. In terms of like tools, we have just kind of been using what we left off with. So like, BIM 360 has definitely helped everyone in the office in the sense that all the projects kind of had to go into the cloud, right? Because everyone's not able to be at the same location, right? So that was big for us. I think that's it. I mean, nothing much has changed other than just a lot of communication back and forth between teams on my end, and definitely, we've had to develop like channels for everyone to kind of submit their BIM questions and all those things, So.
Great, thank you, Admir.
It's funny what Pedro just says about the BIM questions. So that's kind of what falls to me. Everybody comes to me with that over this COVID situation. So, anything from Autodesk applications to, what type of collaboration do we need to use, to how do we get connected to other people. We've started Microsoft Teams. We used to be on Skype, so we still have both right now. So it's a little tricky with, managing how do we connect with people around the company, who has what and who's available, due to, everybody's situation is a little bit different. Some people have kids, some people don't. Some people have spouses that have to work as well. So there's coordination between meetings and where can you meet, in your household and all that type of stuff. So it's been, challenging for sure, but we've been able to use the tools that we have. As far as our projects, we have new development projects, and we primarily use Procore for that. Revista is something that we just started this year, so it's not like, you know, it hasn't been the greatest year to really get the full extent of it, but we're kind of excited that, you know, to pass this year and continue on and see where it goes. And yeah, I mean, it's been okay.
Good, that's good to hear. I know, as you said, Amir, I mean, just thanks for bringing up the reality side of everything, that it's not perfect anymore, right? You got pets, you got kids, you got spouses, significant others on calls as well. You know, there's a lot of chaos in the home, so trying to navigate not only just your daily job with all the other distractions going on, it's a fun challenge, right? So we do have another question that came in, a couple more that I want to just jump on here quickly while they're coming up. Do you think there needs to be a greater digital know-how within the industry so that BIM experts and non-BIM experts can collaborate better? And you know, something that was actually brought up in the previous webinar from Natalia was, she said if you can open an email, if you can draft an email, you can use BIM and VDC. So I would like to hear what you guys have to say about that. So non-technical, technical, do we need more digital know-how in the industry, and maybe how do we help with that? So Pedro, I'll let you kick that off.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, I think as the generations, like, yeah, you know, I'm gonna personalize this a little bit. So I have a 14-year-old brother, right, that he is really good at understanding like technology super quick, right, like amazing. Whereas to like later generations, right, like it's really hard, especially the people that are on, you know, directing projects and things like that. It's really hard for them to understand the benefit and the value of BIM sometimes, right? Not all the times, but sometimes. And I think as we proceed as an industry and the years move, right, we will be able to kind of almost be software agnostic, right? Where like it'll be really easy for us to learn a software versus right now is very challenging. But with that being said, I think we do need to implement more right now, more of a training and all these things, so that, you know, everyone can kind of understand where we're moving towards, right? And the benefits of it. I think that's really important.
Admir, Hamad, you got anything to add on that one?
I mean, I'm someone that basically does a lot of the training for the company, you know, from the basics of, you know, how do we use Revit to how do we collaborate, how do we use any type of technology that's in the design world, right? And, you know, at the end of the day, you will have people that are tech savvy, and then there's going to be people that are just not. How do we bring those two together is really when you kind of, you know, are looking for the mix of the both. I think that you can't have just everybody be techie and everybody just understands technology. There needs to be that mix of both worlds, and as long as we are able to kind of connect those as teams so that we can kind of get them to collaborate more, then you will see more outcomes, better outcomes from everybody on the team. So in my personal opinion, it's, you know, it's all about training. Training is forever. It's never going to stop. Technology is never going to stop. It evolves all the time. There's software that just came out this morning that I never knew of, you know, and it's going to be something I'm going to be looking at. Well, that's just the way the world is right now. So we're going to have to always think about how do we put together teams so that we all can be kind of, you know, feeding off of each other and learning from each other, because everybody has its strengths and everybody has some weaknesses. We're going to have to kind of work with that. So that's my point.
Yeah, I think that's a good point as well. I guess for my standpoint and perspective, just to build on it, in my opinion, the perfect world would be we have these folks that have the experience and know-how, and then we get with them Pedro's brother equivalent of a technology wizard, and we pair them up. Unfortunately, that's not efficient and economical to do. So what I think I'm seeing is two kind of thought processes really emerging in the industry from my perspective. And I could be wrong in deciphering these, but one is everybody eventually needs to become a tech expert. So, you know, in X amount of years from now, your typical project coordinator or whatever architect, so on and so forth, should be X proficient, right? The other one is, well, you know what? We're not really going to get to that if we envision that as the end game without having sort of a short-term solution, which Admir talked about, which is a lot of intense training and creating a support staff essentially that is really good with the technology, but still have crossover with whether it's architecture, engineering, or construction, whatever the realm is, right? I think finding that balance is going to be a winning sauce, if you will, for a lot of corporations and companies. So great question. There's no answer. If anybody thinks they have the answer, you're going to start making a lot of money.
No, that's well said. And I think it goes back to what you were saying earlier about one size doesn't fit all, right? People are very different. People learn differently. Some want the one-on-one. Some just gravitate towards show me a video. I'll follow along. I'll pick it up over my lunch. So there's a lot of different ways to roll that out. And one size doesn't necessarily fit all. So it gets back to kind of that communication side. How do you learn the best? And let's set up a learning path for you to make you successful. Another question from the audience here. How would you like to see a small subcontractor who wants to be collaborative but is stuck in the blame game, disconnected context of traditional construction? How could they take a bottom-up approach to moving forward in collaboration? I'm sure you've seen some of this, Hamad, over the course of you rolling out BIM on projects and getting some feedback from subcontractors. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. And it's going to be hard, perhaps, to answer in the context the individual may be asking. So again, afterwards, if you want to reach out to Sean or myself or anyone on the panel, please do so. Generalizing as best as I can, from what I've seen, is some of our contractors who were not able to maybe develop this R&D in-house and wanted to sort of get into the game, they had to spend a little bit of money, unfortunately. There's no way around it. So there's two typical processes that I've seen. One was, hey, we go outsource right away. And that, again, if you're not ready to manage, can have a lot of issues and cost implications. The other one is, hey, let's do everything in-house right away. And what I mean by that is you're going to either have to have a specialized firm that you're bringing on board to do the production if your, shop drawing environment is not meant for kind of a virtual setup, or you're going to need to bring someone in-house to kind of help you set that up. And both of those are not kind of cheap costs, right? You get what you pay for with the third party. So either you're going to be spending more time in-house trying to do verification on that, or you bring someone on board to do that. The second part of it is really looking at your relationships with sort of the GCs that you may have been building with and so on and so forth. So if any of them are already in that realm where they're using these technologies, processes, workflows, set up a meeting, get in touch with their VDC or BIM personnel and see what is it that they're looking for, what have they done in the past couple of projects that maybe they can guide you in your local context of what you need to do. And then the last thing too is, you may or may not have had the opportunity as that subcontractor to work on some projects for maybe some owners like Admir who may be working towards getting some BIM and technical digital workflows implemented. So again, not necessarily going out to build yourself work, but just as a knowledge base is like, hey, client X, we worked with you in the past. We noticed that you're going towards this digital project delivery or whatever you want to call it. How can we do something that's going to make a difference that will stick us out from the competition, right? I'm assuming this is probably coming more from the electrical contractor or smaller mechanical kind of side of things, but hopefully that answers that question on that context. And again, from the panel, I think, Admir, you've worked with a lot of different stakeholders. So what do you feel? Is that sort of a context that would be appropriate on your side too?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. A lot of it goes back to they will outsource if they don't understand it, or can't handle it because they just don't have the time, or don't want to spend the time to learn it right now. But if they do want to have that continual growth with the companies that they build relationships with, then they kind of start finding ways to maybe introduce a BIM person into their pre-con team and kind of establish that part and kind of grow it from one person into two, and then eventually into a department, and just continue on that way. So.
And some of the feedback we've gotten, just to wrap up, Sean, sorry,
No, you're fine. Keep going.
Yeah, the contractors that were not using this kind of a workflow technology that then implemented it and went through the learning curve was like, yeah, we spent a little bit upskilling, if you will, our team and all of that, but then downstream, the savings that they get, this is where it gets interesting, is how do you quantify that, right? So your foremen are on site potentially less, your labor obviously goes down in that kind of regards, but then also your material. So like, what are you cutting and grooving on site, for example, and all that kind of stuff can dwindle down too. So again, it's really hard to give you an answer because it becomes an operational improvement, which if you don't already have a way of tracking certain operational metrics and data, how do you get your ROI? So.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going to go, Hamad, is quantification, right? And some of this gets into even fabrication. You're talking about materials on site. How can you leverage this technology to help with prefabrication so you're bringing less out? You're able to do more offsite and pull that in and make it easier for an install. But the other thing too is I would just say kind of how a lot of organizations start is identifying some of that waste in processes. Are there ways to better the overall process? And technology can help with that, leaning up some of those processes. So, even when we roll out an implementation at Revisto, we talk about goals and what are the goals in using Revisto? What are some of the processes that our customers have, and how can we insert ourselves and help them with that overall process? So I would suggest starting there, which will help tell the story about why this is going to be important, which gets into Hamad's comment about spending some additional money up front, right? You need to have that expertise, you need to have the tools, but you need to start with why you're going that route. But yeah, great answers there, guys. One more question from the group, and I'm interested to see what the three of you have to say about this one. Is, do you see more organizations combining VR and BIM? And have you found that VR actually enhances BIM? So Pedro, I'm going to start with you and put you on the spot again for this one.
Yeah, this is a really good question. And yes, I think the answer to this, organizations, and one of them is us, right, Shop Architects, we are combining virtual reality with BIM a lot. I mean, again, this is going to be really important because as we kind of move towards like a digital era and like, move away from 2D documentation, right? How do we curate? How do we understand buildings now, right? Like, it's not going to be through flipping a page, right? But rather, how do you immerse yourself into a model, right? And I think we've been doing that a lot with like tools like Enscape and straight from Revit, we present it to, we have these like walkthroughs after every submission with the client where they come into like our VR cave and they just kind of like go ahead and start, in combination with Revisto, we start creating issues of things for them to review in virtual reality. So I think these things are very important. Yeah, VR will enhance BIM, I think, or does enhance BIM.
Thank you. Yeah, Admir, how about you from your perspective? Do you guys use a lot of VR in your organization?
We have used it in the past, and we use it every once in a while. I think it is important. I think there is a space for it in our world, in our ecosystem. It's just a matter of, you know, what do you want to use it for? Is it more of the concept side and the design side, or is it more to show to the client and impress some of the people that are investing the money into it? So there's multiple places and parts where you can actually plug in VR, and you know, my hope is that it will advance a little bit further, and there's more evidence in like how people use it in different ways. And I think that we will continue using it. It's just a matter of, you know, are we gonna have caves like Pedro mentioned, or are we gonna have it, you know, something more basic where we just put in, you know, glasses and we're in there. We don't need to have a space for it necessarily. So I don't know. I mean, I think in the next year or two, there's gonna be some advances for sure that's gonna kind of get all of us excited and want to experiment more and do some more research and development. So.
Yeah, and what about you, Hamad, at Elliston? You guys leveraging VR?
Yeah, so I mean, it's not sort of in our day-to-day process embedded across the company. We have, for example, several Oculus Go's where we've been using that for sort of pre-con and sort of like Admir was saying, to do show and tell kind of exercises. And then we've got sort of our, you know, like the Rift S and the tethered sort of VR headsets, and you know, we've been able to, as an example, for one of our clients, we went out, we scanned their space, we did a BIM model equivalent, and then we were able to put that into Revit, so in a VR environment, as we were doing a walkthrough with our client to showcase, hey, we can use technology, we can do modeling, we can, you know, use reality capture in an environment, and we can put it in VR to show you that we can package the solutions together, right? So we're definitely seeing that, and it is something that's happening. One thing on our design build side we're starting to see more is the clients asking for it, similar to what Pedro was saying, is like, hey, we want to be able to do design reviews or mock-up reviews and so on and so forth within a VR environment. So definitely I think that organizations are already combining it. Where I've sort of seen it more so is more on the wearables side of things. So like, you know, with the Microsoft HoloLens 2 coming out, which is more AR than VR, we have a site out in Ontario that they've been using that on a civil project, for example. And then also, you know, some of the platforms that we've seen apart from Revit, so that are coming up, that are starting to offer it in a different way. So for example, one of the problems was not everybody wants to spend, you know, $500 to $1,000 plus get a gaming PC to get tethered VR experience. So now we've seen, you know, softwares like Giulia that we're using, which just take 360 panoramas, for example, and make that factor easier. So to answer your question, yes, we're seeing it. Does it enhance BIM? Yes, it does. And the way that I want to wrap this up is, you know, you look at your typical 2D drawings, or you look at art, and everybody is going to look at that differently based on experience. So if I show that to Admir versus my superintendent, the same drawing, they're both going to look at different things. And the same thing with your model, right? So if you're sort of a BIM nerd kind of person, and I show you a 3D model with a million different colors, you'll decipher it. But if you're not used to that process, all of a sudden you got these flashy colors and geometry, you're gonna be like, I don't know what I'm looking at. All of a sudden, when you put them in that VR space, which takes your X, Y, Z in a relative fashion, then the person can relate to it more, build that experience, and in my opinion, will build up more of that ability to leverage BIM. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you guys. So I do have one more question that I'm going to ask, unless something else comes in here from our audience. But you know, we've talked a lot about the collaboration side. We've talked about the people side. Hit on some of the VR now, some of the rollout and how you guys make this successful. I have a question regarding accountability. Hamad had mentioned that earlier on in our discussions, and you know, accountability is important. It's the, you know, being able to close out issues because it's in someone's court to finish out. But we also know that you got to tread lightly in certain instances, and yeah, and not be looking over someone's shoulder, I guess is the easiest way I would say that. So, you know, how have you guys over the course of this process of rolling out these integrated collaboration platforms been able to successfully have that accountability piece to help drive completion of some of these items that need to be completed as you guys are working through coordination. So I'll let Admir start that one off.
Sure. I mean, the first thing comes to mind is the BIM execution plan. As far as like when we start a project, we need to have that ready and, you know, kind of go over that with the entire team. But another thing that we do that, you know, kind of helps us is we create a sort of like a BIM guideline that we attach to our contract verbiage, so that as we're going through this, you know, people that are the third party are aware that we want certain things. We are requiring certain, you know, assets within that model. We're looking at certain things that we want to have so that we can further, you know, continue our process on our end, because there's multiple departments that we deal with, and those departments depend on this type of information. So we really are trying to get, you know, those two parts in place, and then when the project sort of starts, there is obviously a schedule of times where we actually are starting to review the models and looking at things. And when we do, and if there is discrepancies or things that haven't been modeled appropriately or what we asked for, then we kind of, you know, raise the flag, go back to it, talk about it. More often, you know, it's really about, like, you know, the updating the Revit file, for instance, into a version that we said don't do it, and somebody already does it because it, you know, that's what they wanted to implement for their, you know, company, which we understand, but there's a process in place, and there is a way for us to communicate that at the beginning of a project. So those are the types of things that, you know, we kind of have in our, you know, program, so that we can kind of go through the project and, you know, just raise the flag. And if anything does come up at the end of a project that we don't know about or that we were not aware of, we kind of go back to that contract and, you know, add it to our BIM guidelines for the next project that's gonna, you know, start. So that's
great. Thank you. Pedro, how about you?
Yeah, I think it's what Amir said. The BIM execution plan it's really important to you know, from the beginning, kind of set a guideline for everyone to follow, right? Another thing that we implement in our office is we have this QA/QC process, right? So that when these issues are coming up, right? Let's say our technical director marks something up in the drawings, right? And then one of our designers picks it up. You know, it's almost like that's that process of highlighting it with a yellow pen if you picked it up or not, right? But for us, it's more of, you know, with Revisto, we kind of the platform allows us for, you know, to be able to kind of, you know, select if it has been solved, right? And then someone else in the project has to double check and close that, right? Make sure that that person has picked that comment up and needs to be able to close it. So, you know, it's similar to the QA/QC process in our office, where like someone is always checking if that comment has been picked up and if the coordination issue has been fixed. So that helps us a lot.
Great, thank you. And Hamad, how about you?
Yeah, I think like the framework aspect, like the BIM execution plan, your documentation, your specifications. I know our friends in the UK and Europe call it the EIR, or Employment Information Requirement kind of guidelines there. So that is definitely the key. The second part is up to sort of what tools and processes we implement, right? So on our typical construction processes, before I was even born, they had punch lists and track lists and all of that, and their methods of tracking that may not have been instant, but that rigorous process was there. On the VDC side and the BIM side, when it started, you know, we were relying on some of those, I don't want to call them archaic methods, but essentially archaic methods to do the same tracking. And that wasn't working too well. You know, multiple spreadsheets, meeting minutes, and all that kind of stuff for 3D sort of environment. Our first real experience, which changed accountability in a BIM kind of context, in the VDC virtual context, was when we used Tech Club BIM site on a project 5-6 years ago to do shop drawing review for major structural steel elements. And in that process, you know, ourselves, the architectural team, the engineers, and the steel contractor, we're all within BIM site making comments and all of that in real time. And that sort of was like a aha moment, if you will, for me, that, hey, wow, we need something like an ICB that can enhance the accountability, right? So I think that has been something that we're looking at with like Revitso, for example, bringing on, is now that everybody has the same platform to track the same 3D issues, which before we were sort of, for lack of a better word, we were almost like the pit bull going after everyone, like, hey, you have this issue, you have this, you know what I mean? Now it's sort of like, here's our report, here's our metrics. Hey, Pedro, for the past 5 weeks, your issues have been going up. You're not really closing them out. What's going on here, right? I'm just picking on you there, but but those kind of things are now possible, right? So that's, I think, what we're seeing, and is helping the accountability there.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you guys. And I do want to give just a really quick, I know the conversation's been fantastic with you guys. So I didn't want to break it and jump into an extended demo, but I do want to showcase just a little bit of Revitso for folks on the call here today, just so you understand what it looks like, what we offer. Again, it's going to be very abbreviated because we don't have a ton of time. And I just want to make sure that if anyone has any questions for me at Revitso, obviously, but for any of these guys on the phone, and we'll wrap it up after I show this in just a second here. So, you know, we've been talking a lot about the integrated collaboration platform. And for the panelists, are you guys looking at my Revitso screen or my workspace right now?
It's your workspace right now.
Okay, let's change it over to here then. It's hard with the dual screens. Okay.
There you go.
Perfect. Thank you, Himan. So as I've said, Revitso is an integrated collaboration platform. What that means is we can tie a lot of different pieces of information together. What we're looking at right now is obviously the 3D model for this project, design, fabrication. We can do existing conditions through reality capture. Point clouds can come directly into Revitso. And then we also have the 2D side of the information, the construction documents, design documents, at those certain increments that you guys are pushing out into the project. We tie all this information together. We work off of coordinate systems. We can tie all that together. We can overlay the 2D on top of the 3D, use that to make some better informed decisions on, you know, design versus fabrication. You know, this really helps with some of that verification aspect on the project as we have all these different pieces of information coming together. And the other thing that we want to communicate regarding Revitso is that this platform works on your desktop, your laptop, your iPad. We're not connected, we don't have to be connected to Wi-Fi. We're going to download and cache this information that's relating to the model, to the 2D, to the issue side onto your device, so you guys have the freedom to walk with on the job site or without that tethered Wi-Fi. Any issues that are documented, any changes to the model, to the 2D, will be updated when you connect back into that Wi-Fi environment. What we're looking at right now is actually a sneak peek of 5.0. This is a release that's coming out later this year, something that a lot of our customers have put a lot of feedback into our tool, and we've added a lot of their suggestions into Revitso here. And again, as I said, this is stuff that's available on an iPad, on a desktop, being able to isolate certain pieces of information within the project. Now, this is something that has been available with some other tools, but not being able to do this on an iPad without that connection, right? The accountability side of Revitso is something that is important, something that we've hit on within this particular discussion here today. And really the backbone of Revitso and being able to democratize BIM and make it available to everyone is also that accountability side of the project. So being able to tie issues to model elements within the project, being able to select these and talk through maybe a design change that's going to be happening on the project, assigning this to a specific individual within the project so that they can track it down, right? I can assign this to Brett Settles, who's taking care of this issue. And because we are tied to coordinate systems, we can see these issues on 2D and in 3D. We've talked a lot about conversation and communication and not over communication. So one of the great things about Revitso is having that chat window, being able to add comments in here for you know, need to reroute in this instance, and keeping it very simple, obviously due to time. But you know, all this is tracked here in Revisto with the timestamp with the person who actually communicated this, which means that we're not tracking down information on emails and snapshots on other markups on PDFs. It's all here residing in this issue itself. Hamad talked about status, being able to understand where things are within the project from a status perspective, all being communicated here. Now, as I said, we can walk through 2D and 3D information. So I can see where this issue is on the 2D floor plan. I can see where it is on another floor plan if I want to get that different perspective. Whatever we have loaded up here, and again, this gets back into the coordinates, this issue is on an X, Y, and Z coordinate. Now, due to time, I'm not going to be able to jump into some of the other things, but just from a overview perspective of what's changed in Revisto in the 5.0 release, for some of you that do know Revisto, what's coming up is we are having search sets, we are having appearance profiler work within Revisto, so you don't have to rely on some other tools to bring that into the platform. And again, this is going to work with all devices. So it's not a different user interface as you pick up a different device to go out onto the site. So I am going to switch things back over. I know we're running low on time here, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. And let's go ahead and stop sharing screen. And I do want to thank all of our panelists here who have joined us. Amir, Pedro, Hamad, thank you guys very much for joining us here today. I really appreciate all of your comments, all your insight. Really appreciate you guys jumping on and just talking about your perspective and experiences. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll turn things over. So thanks everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day. If you have any questions, like we said, please reach out. We're happy to answer any of those. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean, and to all of our panelists. It was really great to hear about your insights on integrated collaboration within the world of BIM. We're now going to have a presentation from Anita Soni. So over to you, Anita.
Hi there. 1 second, let me just stop my slides. Okay, I hope everyone can hear me okay. Hi there, my name is Anita Soni, and I'm just going to try and move this 1 second, sorry. And I'm going to be talking to you today about the role of information management for as-built production. I'm a senior BIM manager at Skanska UK, and at the beginning of this year I started to look at the red line and as-built process, something that's often overlooked and sort of avoided during construction. And before this I actually worked for the client and customer side for railway infrastructure. So when I first joined Skanska, it was quite an insight to see the issues that we have around the as-built production. I'm also working on the HS2 Mainworks project, which is a high-speed 2 rail project in the UK, going from the south to north of the UK. And on that, I'm the as-built BIM manager. And even though we haven't built anything yet, the fact that they've brought in an as-built person, for me, is a really good sign. So I actually today just wanted to talk to you about my personal experiences and insight of dealing with as-builts and some of the painful things that we have to go through within construction. So discussion points for today, I will be looking at a very high level for those who aren't aware, what is an as-built, what do we mean by this? And then look at the current challenges associated with this. And then sort of towards the end, I'll look at sort of my thoughts and what I believe we need to sort of do going forward in terms of getting key stakeholders, requirements and resources. And then finally look at the future of as-builts and my discussion, an area of interest of mine personally, but also going forward, what it means. So what is an as-built? At a very high level, it's an accurate representation of what's been constructed or built, simple as that. It is often part of the handover package for the client or operator or maintainer to utilize. So at the end of the day, the client or maintainer just needs to know where is what and how can it be used and what is its lifespan. Ideally, it should be based on the design intent. So when we have detailed design or fabrication information, it is intended that not too much varies when you hit construction and when you build to this information. And also, the deliverable requirements should be defined by the client or customer. So it's basically understanding the client's wishes, what they need, what information they need and when, in what file format, for example, as well, if we go to that sort of detail. And ideally, this should be given well in advance of the handover stage, and it should be really during the tender process. So just to visualize the process based on my previous slide, you basically have very high level design, build and handover. So I'm just going to quickly focus on my experience with the as-built process, and this means focusing on the build and handover stages. So as we hear, zoomed in, build, handover, but there's a little sort of convoluted way around to get to this. We can't just simply say, this is what we've built, here you go, client. So when we hit site, you'll build to a drawing, for example, and what needs to happen is the people constructing, the construction team, the engineers, for example, they need to produce a red line drawing. I believe it's called different terminology at different parts of the world, so please bear with me. So red line drawing is basically marking up the variation and the deviation of what's happened compared to what was the proposed design. I just want to note here that this is all stuff that's outside of the construction tolerance. So things that are outside the construction tolerance need to be marked up, and then that needs to be informed back to the designers to then produce the as-built. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is that the construction team don't often realise that the red line, they believe that the red line is the final stage of this process actually, but in fact what needs to happen is the red line then needs to be converted to an as-built, which is basically getting rid of all these lines and mess and just producing a bunch of drawings mainly, for example, which makes up the package for the health and safety file or operation and maintenance manual. And it's not just the as-built drawings, there's a lot of certification that needs to go in there, a lot of quality checks, tests and inspection plans. But essentially, the client needs to know what has been built, where, and how to operate and maintain it. And then the next stage is to then give this data and information to the client in whichever format they've requested. So in my 4 years within Skanska, I've seen clients ask for very different types of deliverable formats. So some have literally just asked for pieces of paper to be filed away, and then that will get shoved in some store cupboard somewhere. But then they are moving slowly towards the digital age through digital transformation, and now looking towards having that cloud, working in the cloud from the start so that it can just be handed over. And then that then gets fed back from that to the handover to the client. So the challenges, so I just want to give an insight into the challenges I've seen in the last few years when working on a typical construction project. So one of the biggest challenges, which I believe then has a backward knock-on effect onto all the other challenges that I'll describe now, is the deliverable requirements from the client and what's in the contract as well. So often I've seen in contracts describe as-builts will be produced during the end of the project. There's not much information apart from that, and you can then sort of tease out the requirements from the client, but this happens far too late in my opinion. It's happened once we've built something. Also, I've not really seen much in the contract in terms of responsibility and who should be doing what and when, which actually leads me on to then there being this lack of definition of roles and responsibilities and people taking ownership, because it's been so vague in the contract and the employer's information requirements, for example. There's a lack of uptake of ownership, and that does have a massive knock-on effect because there's very little incentive then. Then, as I said, that then sort of reduces the engagement levels from all the stakeholders that should be involved in the process. I think a lot of question marks are asked, and because nobody really knows the answer, because they can't really get an answer from the client or customer, for example, it just sort of gets left behind and left out, and people don't really think about it until the end. And I can think of so many projects where they haven't thought about that, which is funny to me, because BIM was all about building with the end in mind, thinking about the end. Another issue that I've noticed, and I'm sure the BIM crowd out there will appreciate, is there's a lack of construction tolerance definition. So particularly for MEP, for example, I've not seen a list of defined construction tolerances for particular assets that we're building. So again, that then affects how the red line is carried out, because the teams aren't sure if it's within tolerance or not, and there's a lot of back and forth happening. So it then sort of has a negative effect on producing the red line and as-builts. There is definitely a lot, the information integrity is lost from the design to the as-built production. So from my perspective, I've had some great experiences where we're working on projects and BIM has maintained the data integrity throughout. And then something happens when we hit site and we go to build something, and I just feel like it just spirals a little bit out of control, and you lose the integrity of the data because it just gets sent to so many different places, and there's not one place where it can all be put back together. So that's including requests for RFIs and technical queries, for example, and field change requests. But that also then feeds into the red line and as-built production. So we do lose a lot of information integrity. That then has a bit of an effect on the cultural behaviour towards the as-built process. And as I described earlier, we're not, as a construction company, we're not really thinking about it as a proactive thing. It's very reactive. And there's definitely a mindset of when we've built something, that's it, we're done. And then there's a lot of people that have to come in and pick up the pieces essentially and try and figure out what happened. I've had a lot of experiences where engineers have left their particular site once they finish their works package, and they haven't been forced or incentivized to do their red lines and sort of have that interaction with the designer or whoever is producing the as-builts. So then they leave, and then we have to second them back once we've reached that as-built stage. So it's for me, that's really inefficient. And then this has basically been my biggest issue as I've sort of done more and more research into this. And basically, for some reason, which I understand, the responsibility of redline and as-built production has now is falling under the BIM team. And for me, that shouldn't be the case. So, okay, yes, we know what the information is and we can help manage it, but it's not actually our responsibility. We should be facilitating this. So because of that knock-on effect from lack of roles and responsibilities and engagement and not really knowing who needs to do what, it just ends up falling onto the BIM team. So after a lot of reflection and sort of trying to dissect the problems encountered, I started to list a bunch of the stakeholders and key stakeholders that need to be involved in this process from the very beginning. So looking at the commercial side, we need to look at what's in the contract, and we need to do that at tender stage. So we need to engage with the commercial people looking at the contract and establish that as-builts do need to be in there, first of all, because sometimes they're not often in there, but also we need to understand who's responsible for them. So I understand on different types of contract, there's going to be different requirements and who does the as-built. But that needs to be defined in whether it's in the contract, the works information, the employer's information requirements, for example. Not only that from the commercial point of view, but there needs to be a pot of money or resource allocated to the production of as-builts. I know that's quite hard to establish at the beginning of a project when you don't really know, the scale of these things, but there needs to be some sort of consideration. Again, because it's with the end in mind, we need to think about, at the end of the day, the client just wants an as-built drawing. What did you build and where? So we need to maintain that integrity. The designers are also massive key stakeholders. Just because they've designed something and they've given it to the construction contractor to build doesn't mean that's it for them. More often than not, they then are involved in the as-built production, so converting the red lines that are produced from the site team going to the as-builts, and they need to be kept into the loop. And also they should be anyway, because of the other processes involved, like requests for information, technical queries, field changes. So I feel like this can be one conglomerate. Design managers as well, just overseeing the whole process and being aware and making sure it's in their list of deliverables, and things can't be closed out until the as-builts have been complete. Then also from the quality manager point of view, so I mentioned earlier about the handover package, and that is a big remit for the quality manager's point of view. So the as-builts make part of the handover package, so they need to be involved in the process, so we can make sure that we've given the right information back to the quality manager, who then feeds that back to the client. The next two are huge. We need to have a massive input from the engineering and construction teams. So they are the ones going out with this design drawing and building. And we need to understand from them, and they need to understand what they need from us as well. So it's very much a collaboration process. And we also need to understand their capability and what they can and can't do, and where they need support and resource. And then the final two, I think, are key. So you need the survey team, who are massive in actually producing the data capture for the as-builts more often than not. So they're doing the verification basically of what has been built, and has it been to tolerance. That then informs the engineer and the construction team to then figure out, does it need to be redlined, or can it just, is it within tolerance? Then we can just go straight to an as-built, for example. And then for the information management team, or the BIM team, they are very important in terms of managing the data and the information throughout the life cycle of the project. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the problem is that I think because we are definitely one of the key people being involved in the whole life cycle of the project, the responsibility and onus ends up being on us. So that's why I've sort of split my thoughts, are that the green are the facilitators. They'll provide the information and the processes, but actually the major key stakeholders should be the blue stakeholders. So then moving forward, I was just trying to sort of summarize it in a bit of a succinct way and just say, okay, what are the key requirements and resources here? What are we missing? And for me and my experiences, this has been lacking. So we need to clearly define roles and responsibilities of the as-built production in the contract. And as I said, that will have a positive effect on then it being cascaded down throughout the construction company and team. Knowing that there's a resource and budget as well for the as-built production as an incentive as well, but also needs to be done. The supply chain resourcing and capability. I've been on a few projects now where the suppliers or the supply chain people who are doing the who are installing and constructing stuff, it's either not in their contract to produce the as-built, so then as a construction contractor we need to take that responsibility, but also their capability. Knowing if they have the resource to actually do it, and if they don't, we need to make allowances for that, and that needs to happen during the procurement stage. So again, it's like a knock-on effect. So the client defining to the contractor what the as-built requirements are, and as a contractor we need to define what the supply chain is giving us. And last but not least, this is fundamental to me, and this has been a classic moan from a lot of my colleagues as well, that we need to incorporate survey into the construction program, because say we're installing MEP and then it gets covered up, for example, we have that window of opportunity to do a quick as-built scan, laser scan, for example, or do some checks before it then gets closed off. And I've seen so many issues where we haven't been able to do an as-built properly because things have just been closed off because we just, a slab has covered it basically. So it's that key stakeholder engagement, telling each other what's happening, I think is fundamental. So after talking about what I've been thinking of, what like the status where we are now, just looking about the future, and from a personal point of view. So as I mentioned, I'm on the HS2 Main Works project, which is a main civils contract, and the fact that they've employed myself as an as-built person, I think shows that there is that step change from the client's point of view, client and contractor's point of view. I think, in my opinion, we've lost far too much money and we've just done things so wrong in the past that they're realizing that there needs to be a change. Also, to my pleasant surprise. We've actually been given an as-built specification before we've even built anything. This is something that's come out alongside the employer's information requirements. And there's actually an opportunity for us to negotiate with the client on how is best to do this. Okay, they've been vague about what they want in terms of deliverables, but then this is our opportunity to negotiate with them and upskill them and inform them of what will work best for them. One of the issues actually for this particular project is we don't know who the operator and maintainer are going to be, so we don't necessarily know what the requirements are, but we can sort of use our best guess and, you know, an informed decision to basically decide on what information they will need. And when you look at what's being produced at the design stage, there's going to be very little variance in terms of change of attributes and information that we need that's going to get handed over, for example. And as I said, I think construction tolerance and defining that, I think, will be a key player to help automate and improve the efficiency of this process. So now I'm just going to focus on a particular interest, a special interest of mine. So this is very much about going from the design to build stage before we go over to the handover. And it's very much looking at the survey as-built verification. So generally speaking, I don't want to presume too much, but we generally now have a design model for permanent works, and it's in 3D. And this is sort of part of the benefit of PAS 1192 and ISO standards. It's doing 3D coordination. And again, as I said, it always looks great in design, and then something happens when we hit site and we kind of lose track of information and data and what's happened. So more often than not now, what I've seen, okay, I'm working on big projects, so we're at a big advantage, we're very well resourced. More often than not, once something has been constructed, we go out and laser scan it, for example, and produce this 3D point cloud. That, for me, is what can help reduce any uncertainty and data loss and improve the integrity of the data by then overlaying what has been built over to the design model and then producing this kind of heat map, for example, where we can see in green what is within tolerance, and then the purple areas, for example, are showing what needs to be looked at, and then the red is basically is it either out of tolerance or there isn't any data. For example, this is just one example of a software that's available on the market. But what the benefit of this is going forward is that there's a potential then to automate where something is out of tolerance. So where there was the purple or red, for example, it's saying, do you want to move it as per the point cloud that we can see? And I think we need to take that one step further and so now incorporate the construction tolerance within the attribute information during design, because I do believe that's where it should be and can be defined, which will then help streamline that process. So for me, this is a very brief, you know, I've barely touched on that concept of survey as built verification, and I'm happy to talk about this to anyone who's interested. But for me, that provides that better latency and accurate representation. Once you've got the survey, you can do the comparison. You don't have to wait for someone to go out on site and, you know, do some checks and stuff. And that is working towards this progressive as built, which is, you know, the ideal situation, the utopia of as-builts. For me, it's a big one. It removes the need for a paper and a pen, and a red pen particularly. Again, you do just lose information and data the minute you're printing something out. That is just lost. Whereas if you have this portal, for example, where you've got all these key stakeholders being able to access this database, they might not get the technicalities and they don't necessarily need to, but there's an audit trail. And I think for me, that's really important, and working towards building that single source of truth. The knock-on effect from that is retaining information from redline to as-built. As I said earlier, you have that audit trail, and you can then break that down by roles and responsibilities and say who should be monitoring what. I think in the previous panel discussion, it was all about, you know, monitoring who should be doing what and checking up on them if there's some sort of overhanging actions that need to be carried out. For me, more often than not, I don't know about you guys, but we've just spent a lot of money on producing as-built. So first of all, we've made the mistake of not having the as-built requirement in the supply chain contract. And then when there's been a little change, they're charging huge amounts of money and taking advantage just by opening a drawing and making minor changes. So when you look at a curve of the construction project, you then see this sort of spike up in costs at the end, which haven't been accounted for and are usually disallowed costs because we just haven't thought about it and it's just been far too reactive. And for me, it's an incentive for the contractor and the client. It's ensuring a quicker and timely handback. So you're being proactive and not reactive. You're not waiting for the design life cycle stage to end. You're just thinking about it with the end in mind. And I think that's where we are seeing that step change with clients and making sure that we're constantly thinking about it and having roles with people like myself always questioning, okay, you're doing that, but what about the as-built? How's this going to help with the as-built? So sort of moving forward, we do need to start at the end and work our way back essentially. So we need to engage with the client on the handover requirements and incorporate that into the contract. And as I said, we are seeing this step change in attitude, and I do feel like we are getting somewhere. And I think it's because things have gone not well and not great in the past that we're finally drawing that line. And I do think with BIM as well, and that process of thinking with the end in mind, we are managing, and clients are recognizing that we need to focus on that aspect. For me, that then has a knock-on effect on the minute it's defined clearly, it's that opportunity stakeholders take ownership of their roles and responsibilities, which I think is key, and you can actually call them out on it and hold them to it basically, which I think is great, especially from a commercial point of view. I do believe that will have a cultural change towards the as-built production, particularly with the construction contractor side. And a colleague of mine always has given me this quote of, you know, when the project is built, it isn't done. And so that's very much a construction contractor opinion. So again, I'm having that early engagement and ECI, early contractor engagement, but with the client, but also with the supply chain about the as-built production and making sure we think about it. And then finally, it's upskilling in the information management process. So it's not only, and it's upskilling everyone, particularly the engineering construction team and the supply chain. So we can talk about BIM and we can help them understand the information process that needs to happen, but it's also the digital tools to help with that cultural change. So I believe the technology is there. We have a lot of even digital 2D red line markup is available, but they're just still not comfortable using it. So it's not only about the processes, it's about the digital tools. And I believe combined together that these will help make a step change. And that is the end of my presentation. So I'm just going to take a few questions. So one good question here is, have you experienced any challenges with trying to get your clients to adopt digital construction practices into projects? Yes, but also I found, particularly my last two clients, very passive, and they're wanting us to tell them what is best, because for them, as I said, at the end of the day, they just want to see something built. So yes and no. I think yes, in that we need to upskill them more as well, but they are quite open to understanding from the experts, as it were. And as you can see from the previous panel discussion, it's an opportunity for us to sell our services to them. So one question is, how do you see as-built production evolving in the future? Do you think it can be improved in any way? So I think maybe this question was asked before I got to my final slides, but I see it evolving, again, as I said, it's both a cultural aspect and that incentivization, but also looking at the information management processes and the digital technology that is available. For me, we still haven't quite got there with the technology. So coming from a railway infrastructure background, there's a lot of workarounds that we're having to utilize compared to building projects, for example. So I think once we found sort of a workaround, I think it will massively improve. And to be honest, I can think it will help to work towards automation and make things more efficient. Okay, I'm just gonna, so even if a client specifies they want a model in the contract, not all in a supply chain are capable of consuming this, especially for O&M. Do you think drawings still add value for the client, and who should create this if not in the original contract? So the first question, so yeah, do you think drawings as well? So yes, I think drawings still add value. I'm not saying that we should just hand over a 3D model as is. I think we're not quite there yet from an O&M point of view and from the supply chain. And actually, one of the most recent as-built specifications have said we would prefer a 3D model, but where it's not possible, particularly fabrication drawings, if the model hasn't been made available. I think for now there will be this sort of conglomerate, like this combined handover package that we will produce. And I think that's where we're getting into trouble, because a previous client asked for a 3D model as built, but we weren't, that wasn't really well defined. It wasn't to say to what tolerance, what information, but also there was a bunch of drawings as well for a particular discipline, because they weren't working in 3D, for example. So we had to negotiate, and we ended up having to hand over the design model plus the point cloud, so that then they can overlay, and that was almost their as-built, for example. But again, that isn't really a very easy option to do. You then need to have the client to have that capability to open the model and overlay the point cloud. So there's definitely a lot of work that needs to be done in understanding tolerances and where the model needs to be updated. Have you found helping, another question, sorry. Have you found helping the key stakeholders you mentioned understand as-built construction and its benefits? Yes, so I'm in a fortunate position at the moment where we can get involved with the early engagement and start talking about the as-builts. And there is a general moan and groan about it, but I think there's enough people now who've been on previous projects to realise the painful process that has come, and we've definitely got allies and spokespeople who've had bad experiences who are just saying, no, we need to think about this. So it's not necessarily for the right reasons, because they've been through a painful process, but definitely engaging the key stakeholders. And actually, I had a meeting with some engineers last week, and they're now asking, okay, what's the tool that we need to do? Where's the process? And I'm being asked to write a red line process, and we haven't even put anything in the ground yet. So it's great for me now. I think there's an opportunity there. And also, I think that needs to be a two-way discussion, because we can all write, as BIM managers, we can all write a bulletproof as-built process and redline process from an information management point of view, but we need their input and their feedback into the documentation and the procedure, because it might work for us in theory, but it's just the engagement and then someone wanting to do their own thing. But the minute we then make it a two-way thing and collaborate and say, we've done this, what do you think? Not, you must adhere to this. I think then we can make allowances and then work towards better collaboration. One more question, I think. Yeah. Are red line comments that reference NCRs kept separate or added to the as-built model? If yes, how is this recorded? That's a very good question. There's so many discussions and painful meetings I've been in where we talk about what happens. So for me, no, NCRs shouldn't have been put in the as-builts. It should only be in the red line. And to be honest, at the red line process, the designer and the design manager should be aware of this non-compliance. So NCR is a non-compliance record. So it should be there in the red line, but it should have already been dealt with. It's almost like a heads up of like, yeah, this happened, but it shouldn't be going into the as-built. One, because it's happened, and two, like the client doesn't really, in my opinion, the client doesn't care what happened in the past. They just want to know what's been built and how it got there. I believe that's all the questions. Yeah, I just want to say thank you for listening to me, and please contact me on LinkedIn if you want to discuss further. I'm very passionate about looking at survey and as-built verification.
Thank you very much, Anita, and thank you as well to all of our speakers for joining us today. A big thank you as well to Revisto for sponsoring this session. You will all receive an on-demand copy of today's session via email. If you had any questions unanswered, we'll be sending your questions to our speakers who will answer these, and we'll have these published on our website. If you have any feedback or any further questions at all, please do email info@festivalofdigitalconstruction.com, and we'll come back to you later this week. Our next webinar will be taking place on the 4th of August at 12:30 AM UK time. This will begin with a panel discussion from Pro Core Technologies on data and decision making, construction analytics. You can sign up for this webinar and others via our website. We hope you enjoyed today's webinar and we look forward to seeing you at the next one. Thank you all.